welcome back to Turn and Burn UK. We are going to turn a oak candlestick today. I've got a demonstration coming up and I need to practice, so today we'll be using this two pieces of oak. This is a 50mm square spindle that is about 350mm long, and we're starting with a square piece of oak which is 50mm thick by 190mm square. So I'm going to mount that in the drive. I haven't got a jacking point set up on this yet, so we shall just mount this in the between centres. And we will knock that round and then put a recess on. Now, I don't normally use recesses, but as this is a candlestick, I need to make sure that it's well held and secure. So just spinning it to make sure that it doesn't catch the rest. We'll set the rest up just below centre, make sure it spins without catching. So you see there, that's why we test before we spin. There we go. So there's a slight warp in this timber which will flatten out as we go. But the first thing I'm going to do is make this round, wearing eye protection, face shield and dust mask. Today I'm using the Stanley dust mask. These are based on the similar design to the Trend, really comfy. I can wear these all day. So you won't hear a word I'm saying moving on, so the rest of this will be done as a voiceover. We're going to start with bowl gouge. So we're going to use a 3/8 bowl gouge by Crown to take the corners off of this blank. We'll start with the speed slow, and we will hold the gouge at about the flute in the 10 o'clock position, just to take those corners off. As the corners are being removed, there will become a gap between the tool rest and the timber. I will stop the lathe regularly just to move the tool rest closer to the timber, because we need to keep the tool rest nice and close to keep it safe. These are going to be fairly rough cuts, and then as the timber becomes more round, we can start using a bevel supported cut, which you can see here. You'll see there, you get these really fine shavings of a bevel supported cut and a really nice finish. So we've got it nice and round, and now we're just going to clean the face to make it flat. I've changed to the small tool rest so I can get nice and close with the chisel working over the main centre of the rest, using the 1/4 inch bowl gouge to take the face flat and create the tenon. We're now holding the timber in the tenon. I'm using a pull cut just to clean the face of the blank. This will be the top of the candlestick base. So we're just cleaning this up so it's nice and flat, and once it's flat we'll drill a hole for the tenon in the candlestick to go. Using a Forstner bit, so we turn the speed down no more than 600 and slowly advance the Forstner bit into the timber. Now that's been done, we are going to use a mixture of bowl gouge and beading parting tool to create the shape on the base. There will be some beads, some coves and some fillets to create the design for this candlestick. Using a bevel supported cut throughout this operation to create a nice finish, and then we'll move on to the sanding, making sure that we use a tack cloth in between grits to remove any dust or abrasive residue. And then we use the Nyewear pads by Chestnut to finish. The white pad you see there is used for burnishing the wood to bring the shine out. It doesn't have any cut in it, whereas the other ones have an abrasive. We've got quite a nice finish here. Just going to put some sanding sealer on here. This protects the surface of the wood from handling. Fair get touched. Prevents greasy finger marks ruining the finish. The wax. You don't have to press too hard with the wax stick, you're just transferring the wax onto the timber and then going to buff it off. Use a bit of speed, you want a bit of heat here. There we go. So the tenon on the back of this will be left on there until the project's finished, and then we'll remove that tenon using a friction plate to hold the timber, and then it'll be ready for use. So let's move on to the spindle. Pony drive. We're going to use a spindle rough and gouge just to knock the corners off and make this piece of timber round. Again, we need to make sure we bring the rest in closer to the timber as we've taken those edges off. Now we're going to set the calipers on the size of the Forstner bit we used to drill the hole for the tenon, and then we're going to use the beading parting tool to create the tenon on the end of the timber, and it'll be that tenon that sits inside the hole we've made in the base of the candlestick. We have set the tenon slightly larger than the hole itself because obviously it's easier to take more wood off than it is to add it back on. The crown drive that is being held in the chuck is a great piece of kit for this project because it's left marks in the timber that is easy to realign when you put the timber back in between centres. This ensures that when the timber goes back, it goes in and it is still straight, so you don't have to worry about it being off centre. So I'm using the beading parting tool here just to finish that tenon, and then I'm going to mark some lines on the timber that denote the basic lines for the shape of the candlestick. Once these lines have been marked, I'll use the spindle gouges to create the beads and coves, and a parting tool to create the fillets that will make up the design of this candlestick. It's important that we use a bevel supported cut when turning the beads and coves, so these give you a nice clean line and a clean finish. There's a thin parting tool to create the fillet that transitions between the beads and the coves. You can see here that this is almost complete on the design of the candlestick. I'm going to swap over to using a bowl gouge in a minute, just to enhance the cove at the base of the candlestick there. And I will get a catch, which is coming up now. You can see I've stopped and inspected it, and the catch is there. This was where the top wing of the bowl gouge caught the wood when I was using a shear scrape and cut. Easily done, something that we need to be aware of. I'm just checking the size, that final size of the tenon in the base, and then we're going to need to correct the damage that I've caused by the bowl gouge. So I'm going to use the beading parting tool just to remove the weight from that end, and that will take out the damage caused by the catch. Just checking there to see that it's all gone, which it has. And then I'm going to use the spindle gouge just to create a bead on the bottom of the stick there, and that bead will produce a nice transition between the main candlestick and the base when the two pieces are put together. We'll move on to sanding shortly. Same brief as with the base, but because we are sanding a spindle, it's important that we stop the lathe and sand with the piece static to remove any of the circular marks that the sandpaper may have left. It's also really important to recognise that you've spent a lot of time cutting the beads and coves and getting a nice crisp finish. If you sand too heavily, you'll move the edges of the beads and coves, and that will flatten the design, and it means it won't look so nice. I'm just using a sanding block there to get a nice flat surface in that long cove that transitions into a bead. I'm just going to sand 180, 120, 180, 240, and then once we've got to 240 we are going to stop and use a slightly different finish. Just use the tack cloth, same as we did with the base, just to remove any sanding dust or abrasive particles before we move on to the next grit. Note the tack cloth is held in my hand, so if it catches it will get pulled out of the hand, not between fingers or wrapped around the hand. And that should fit in there like that. I've gone a bit too low. There we go. Perfect. So we've gone down to 240. What we're going to do, sanded to 240, we're now going to apply the cellulose sanding sealer. Once that's been applied, we will use the Chestnut product Cut and Polish, which allows us to finish the sanding without generating any additional dust. The particulate in the cut and polish slowly breaks down while you use a cloth to generate a really nice finish. Just to remove any final residual paste, and when we know that's done, I'll go to my favourite finish, which is the microcrystalline wax stick. There we go. We should align the grain.